Alrighty, we're back again. Let's go ahead and get back to our spot. Okay, we're back down here. We were just filling in a little bit of brown onto this area. I think we kind of need to make a fairly good delineation between here and the edge of this petal, although it actually isn't that well delineated. Let's see. Look over here, there's like this little touch of gray. Just find a way to make it kind of grayish. Get some of this gray chalk and smudge it in there a little bit. There's certainly not as much white in here as it looks like there is right now. We need to kind of, anything that looks very white needs to be smudged, because we don't want it to look white, because it's kind of a dark grayish sort of color. So we'll make that just a little darker. There is more of a touch of this sort of olive green in here, especially right here. Kind of smudge that in just a little bit. Give that a sort of soft border. Just throw a little touch of green in there. Okay, that looks okay. I think we need to this area here, let's see. Well, let's just come back to that. I think it actually needs a little touch of this one in there. Some of this sort of kind of quality of that green is a little too, needs to be a little more brightish yellowish, but just a little bit. I think once again, kind of keep coming back to this spot on this flower petal that needs to be, this edge needs to kind of come to a point right there. And it's not, I don't want to call it a white edge, but it's just a little too white the way it is now. But right here we definitely need more of this greenish. And then come in here, come down to this, make this edge come down to this sharp point. Kind of just go over this with a little yellowish. And obviously you'll see when we do the flower petal to the left why. But I think right now we just need a little, this is too sharp on this side. We need to kind of make this a much softer transition. I'll tell you, this pencil is gonna be I'm gonna run out of this pencil before long, and this is one I think I'm gonna need the whole time. Probably gonna have to buy some more. Kind of get this going down. I'll tell you, I spent several hours prepping this project, prepping this area, because I hadn't done drawing at home in a couple years, and it's still definitely not optimized yet. Let's see, I think that looks a little better than it did. Still think we need just a little more, not that one, more of our sort of bright yellow green color, kind of delineating, just kind of overshadowing this whole area here, and delineating it from this, the left edge of that flower petal. Feel like there's just more of that kind of just coming in here. Certainly we need to kind of soften this up a little bit. Really kind of need to just this area kind of needs to be a little more of a sharp contour. And let's just darken this area and just give it a little more substance. We're kind of this area needs to be just a little darker. Okay, let's see. Let's see what this area up here needs to be darker too. Let's see if we can, don't really think that's the, no. Oh. It's kind of, as you can see, I'm kind of getting feeling the urge to darken these stripes, but at this point, you really want to use the right color tone and really not easy to do. Just kind of, I mean, it's just such subtle shading differences. Just barely, when you look at the picture, you can just barely appreciate them. When you draw them on the sheet, it all tends to, it just seems to come out more than you wish it would. I mean, you can smudge it in, but it's still there. Let's see something here. I feel like we just need to darken this whole, and this is risky, but let's just see what happens. Put this on top of here. Kind of just put that and just kind of smudge that in. I think that accomplished something, but I'm not sure exactly what. Let's so look. You can see these areas that clearly just need more green, and it's just not immediately obvious which color. I think these two are the same, maybe a little different. Anyway, up here in this corner, just put a little more of this green on top of here. Just kind of throw that on there and just see what happens when you kind of smudge it in. And you know, I tell you, even when you think your green is going to be dark, it just it's not, you'd be surprised. I mean, when you smudge these greens, even the dark ones, they tend to just brighten up. They don't stay so dark, so you kind of have to struggle. I mean, there are times you've seen where we darken the green with black, but I do not think we want to do that on this part of the drawing. I think over here we might want to put a little green on top of all this stuff here, this sort of olive. Just give it a slightly greener tinge to it. I think it actually might not be a terrible idea to kind of go over these quote stripes with this green, kind of make one more attempt at giving them this sort of unpredictable pattern, you know. See if there's a and then this one here is just so subtle. I almost just want to leave those alone. These are more accentuated in the picture, so you kind of go over those, smudge those up, give them a sense that they're not so well defined. I think over here we need to kind of, I know we put white on top of this, but I think we need to give this a little more of that bright green yellow tinge and maybe go over it again with the white remember, you just kind of it's like a slow process where you're just slowly kind of getting rid of the white background. Let's just see. Let's see. See what happens when we go back over it with white. It's got this sort of whitish. I'll just stick that white in there. Just kind of blunts the way it looks, makes it look a little more cloudy. And then right up through here. And then up here, let's not forget, it was kind of needed to be a little whiter. Let's just do a tiny bit of smudging on this white we just put on. Not too much, because white, I mean, you can kind of smudge it away and basically make it to where you didn't put anything down. Now I do feel like this sort of background yellowish, brownish stuff, I think we need something slightly darker. Well, that was what this was for. That was what this pencil was for. Let's see if we can add some to that right here. There's a touch of right beneath these lighter spots. There's kind of this brownish tinge. There was some over here as well. And honestly, like a tiny bit kind of coming through here, but not too much. Except through here, I would say we just need to kind of just darken the shade of this just a touch. It's actually pretty well delineated on the drawing or in the photo. This sort of brownish looking stuff. Kind of just comes up through here. Okay. And then there was a little more of it kind of over here. Okay, that's a fair amount of dust. Let's vacuum that up real quick. Okay, let's see what happens when we smudge that in there. Just make it a little brownish. Up into there. Okay. So looking at it from kind of a distance, I think overall we need to just kind of add this sort of some amount of green. It kind of just comes through here on these. Just really kind of darken the top parts of these stripes. I'm gonna push fairly hard to kind of avoid having to do it again, but right in here, these, you know, whatever they are, they're darker and they're thicker and they need to be accentuated, and in the other spots they really don't. But except up here, this one does need to be a little. I kind of want to. Okay. Now, let's smudge these again. But we're going to be a little softer this time. I will say, it does not, the camera does tend to make the whole thing look, it adds contrast to what you're seeing. It's like if you ever notice pictures on an iPhone have a lot of contrast, you can see the light and the dark. And it's exaggerated to an extent. Okay, let's see. I actually think we're a little closer to kind of leaving this area for now. I think, honestly, I wouldn't mind kind of 750. Going over the whole thing. With this sort of bright yellow green, if it was possible. It's really not. But I do think we kind of need to just, I think we need to add more of this brown over here. I think we need to really make sure that there's enough of that on this part. There's a little over here, but it's mostly up here. Okay, I think, well, this is a little loud appearing. Maybe a little more gray. Kind of down in here where it's look just a little too bright. Just kind of take away the brightness. I will say, I think we could use a touch of our dark green down in here. We've done a fair amount of smudging of this border, and even though it's not a very sharp border, we kind of just want to maybe delineate it a little better. Probably better to use this kind of olive color too, but we use both. I mean, when you put colors on top of each other, they blend together. More or less. That actually looks better. Alright, so, you know, you kind of get to a point where even if you know that you could spend 10 more hours on a spot, you just don't want to. Kind of where I'm at now, although I do think this thing, honestly, this petal might need just a little bit more of this sort of bright yellow green overlaying most of these areas. Looks like over here we kind of have a little more of that. Certainly kind of in this area it needs a little more of that. And you know, never obviously be afraid to just make up stuff. There's no rule that says you have to follow the picture. I tend to follow a picture. As I said before, I'm not super creative, but occasionally just find myself doing what I want, to some extent anyway. I think I am noticing that we didn't quite sort of maybe just unsharpen this sort of edge. That'd be a little tricky. Let me get that white. Let me get the white pencil. It seems like there's kind of an unnecessarily dark border right there. If you kind of go over it with white, you can usually kind of erase it, but honestly that didn't really work that well. Let's try something else. Let me see something. And let's take our dark green and just make a little bit sort of irregular splotchiness in these sort of over here. Kind of just make these a little darker. We need a little bit of dark in here. Okay. And then let's just smudge it in just a bit, not too much. So you see how easy it is to make smudge things and make them disappear. I think maybe we need a little white kind of in here, kind of dampening up some of these empty spots. You can kind of use that to push into these stripes and make them sort of have those jagged little areas in them. Something up here. This is kind of. That's kind of. And honestly, this edge is really more. It's kind of more yellow than it needs to be. So let's just kind of smudge that in. Probably mostly disappear. But not really, or not completely. Alright, well, let's see. I think overall, we've made more or less acceptable progress. I always say I'm going to come back and go over every single square inch after I put fixation on the drawing. I've never done it except for human faces, and I've only done that a couple times. Okay. Alright, I think now I feel like we should move over to the left, because honestly up here I'm reaching too far. I'm probably gonna have to readjust things. So maybe let's just go and get started over here. We'll start from the top. We'll make a big outline. We'll use the dark green. Well, I'm only going to sharpen the pencils when I need to, but I did get my pencil sharpener. Finally. One thing you notice about drawings, you're your own worst critic. You spend a lot of time doing it, and it doesn't take much to kind of get you feeling like it's not coming out very well. Alright. And the more you finish, the more you don't pay attention to those just first few areas you've done, and it kind of all starts to come together. And then you realize that this definitely needs to be a little more curved. Let's see. Okay, so let's kind of bring this up. You'll notice there's some directions you can move your hand and make things very pretty and curved, and then others it's hard to do it. Okay, make sure we're not coming off the screen. Okay. So now we kind of head up right here. Okay. And of course, as always, these are the moments when you want to be extra careful about actually following the grid, because when you miscount, you have to erase a lot of areas, and that is something you don't want to do. Let me adjust this just a bit. Okay. All right. So right here, it's always these little, very subtle inflection points, and it's hard to capture them all. Not to say that you need to, but kind of the things that go through your mind. Messed up a little bit. Like this. As you can see, fixing something like that is pretty not worth your time, but the more you pay attention to details, the more you get used to paying attention to details. And when you want to do a fairly realistic piece, details matter to an extent. Of course, the larger you're doing, like something I'm doing, which is going to be quite large, but after you've spent a couple hundred hours on it and focused on a lot of details, it can come out pretty nice. But one thing to remember, this type of art definitely just, you can't view it with a microscope. If you start looking at it with a microscope, then you'll just be your own worst critic. Like I said, let's change colors here a little bit, because this, I actually want to use, even though it's not quite this bright, use this one. We can lighten it up ourselves. Here we kind of go straight here. Okay. So we've got this thing in here. Every now and again, it's a good idea to kind of just double check you haven't, totally messed up. Okay, we're good. Alright, let's just darken a little bit. Let's just go around here with some of this dark. Alright, let's just do a tiny bit of black. Do a tiny bit of black. Not much. Just enough to remove any white dots that are sticking through. Just a little bit. right there. You can see the background here is pretty dark, but not quite as dark as it was on that right side. Okay, we don't need to go too far. Now we'll take our dark green and let's get rid of, well, we don't need to do that much, but we'll get to take these grid lines out of the way. It's actually always nice to have a wide open spot. You can cover a lot of area with a little effort. Let's see. Okay, so this is kind of what we did yesterday. I think we put a lot of dark green, we put black, and then we gave it a tinge of yellow. So let's just kind of go around here. I think we can let's use this chalk. Let's use this chalk, kind of go over this. Honestly, this is probably a better color than we used yesterday, even though it's not as dark as that pencil. It kind of sure there's a way to sharpen pastel chalk and make it a little more useful in this situation, but I haven't done it. Not gonna start today. Alright, let's just go. Okay, well, we don't need to cover too much because really we're trying to draw this, not this, but it doesn't really matter what you do. Eventually it all has to get done. Okay. Now let's put this tinge all on top of this group. Put this tinge on here. Because this worked out nicely on the other side. I'm telling you, this pencil here, I really hope I can find the same one again. I thought about buying a whole new set of pencils before I started this. But I figured I would try to spend as little as possible at first. Let's just smudge all that in there. Alright, let's add some black. I guess, okay, let's use that. Add some black in here. And it goes a long way. Further than you think. And it really blends better than you would think. I mean, it really doesn't. Obviously, it darkens that color, but you can still. You can see that color shines through. I mean, it really does. It still looks the same. It just looks like it's in a shadow. sort of come over here and just soften this edge by kind of drawing on the black. See how that softens that? It works. All right. So look, what do we have? We've got, let's just start with our dark green. Inside of here, we've got kind of this dark edge. And you also notice something. Anytime you feel like you've done something and you just feel kind of awkward about it, when you give it a background, it tends to take form. So there's this real subtle kind of just dark green kind of curve comes down this way. Just kind of put that in there. And then there's kind of another one that kind of sort of just blob, kind of goes this way. Kind of comes down. All right. Nothing special so far. Let's take these grid lines out of here. Just want them out of the way. I tell you, I've never had grid lines come off this easy. This was the perfect color to use. This really light green. Let's vacuum that. Let's see. Okay. So then it looks like we can kind of take maybe this lighter olive color, just kind of go over this whole thing, give it a sort of background color. It kind of has a tinge of that bright yellow pencil I keep predicting I'm going to run out of. And we're going to add that to it. I mean, obviously, pastels, they don't mix like paint. It's not the same exactly, but there is some method to it, and it's really just kind of, you do it and you learn it. Alright, let's kind of just smudge all this into. So I would say the whole thing needs to be kind of greened out a bit with this. Let's see what that does. Alright, so now let's kind of go back in with these sort of supposed to be darker green areas. Honestly, the drawing kind of, this part kind of blends with this part a bit. We kind of need to Let's go ahead and overlay all this with this sort of yellow-green. Because I know this color's in there, and you kind of, I want to make it show. It's kind of in there in the middle of these darker areas. Let's see if we can just kind of darken the dark areas. And obviously that contrasts a lot at the moment. Just need to kind of, you know, the one thing you don't want is dark areas that have the white grain of the paper shining through. I mean, it's one thing to have it, I mean, obviously, if you look very close, this type of thing, you're going to have a lot of that. Now, it looks to me like this border has some dark kind of blending in with the darker black above it. And over here in this corner, everything gets a little darker. And really, all of it is a bit darker, but let's vacuum that. Alright, let's kind of smudge this in just a bit. Alright, maybe just a little bit, one more sort of, just kind of adding to this, making it a little less defined, kind of going out a little further from the center of these areas. Kind of do like that. That helps it kind of blend into the background a little better. Sort of kind of gets darker here. Kind of all over here it's darker. Kind of in here. I don't think we need any black in this spot. I mean, we certainly need it in the background, but I don't think we need it like inside of it. Could be wrong. I don't think we need it. That looks a little more subtle. And then over here you can see this sort of just bright green halo kind of bumping into the black. Oh, it's probably not quite that bright green, but it's there. Then we get this sort of gray. Let's just be a little quicker with the gray this time. It's sort of grayish. It's almost got blue in it. Let's see. Let's just put some gray and just see what happens. Don't want to screw it up, but you know. So that's probably a little darker than it needed to be. Let's make that border nice and fuzzy. And I think we're gonna try to make it a little wider. First of all, I think this green comes in a little more down here. Kind of bring this in just a bit. Okay, up here, it's probably And then I'm just gonna kind of go around these little stripes that kind of were continuations of those green ones. Let's see, I think that actually might work. It definitely looks brighter on the camera than it actually is. Yeah, this kind of... see if we can bring in these little stripes just a little bit, kind of like that. And then we'll kind of take the black, go right back over this area. Even though you still want it to be a fuzzy border, you do want it to be a very smooth contoured curve. So what we do is just kind of do very light smudging like this. Be careful when you go into the, the lighter spots after you've been smudging dark. And then I think we need to just kind of, this edge of this is not quite that bright. I think the best thing to do is just take this one, just kind of cover that white, because there really isn't any. And then go over it with white, since that's really the shade I'm looking for, is the white on all the color. And then I think we'll be done once again for the day. I actually think this is looking decent. Kind of zooming out, like I said, when you've got the light shining on it, it's gonna accentuate the contrast significantly. And, we're still not done. We're just moving along, putting the pieces together slowly and just seeing what we see. Okay, that will be it for today.